Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sandbox, your one-stop shop for, I suppose, all gaming news, spotlighting pieces, and everything going on in the gaming sphere. This week on the show, I'm joined by the wonderful Chris. You want to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
And we'll be covering a couple of news pieces this week, going on to a spotlight piece of a couple of games that came to Game Pass this week. Quick rundown of the stories, if you want to know. First of all, is we're going to be talking about the possible rumors of a sort of PlayStation competitor to the Game Pass system on Xbox. We talk about Respawn's decision to delist Titanfall, the first game in March of 2022. A sneak preview of obviously 5 demos out of a greater 35 game demos that are going to be coming to Xbox and will be announced at the Game Awards this coming Thursday. And then Sea of Thieves sees a lot of new stuff come to it in Season 5, so we'll be touching on that as well. Followed then by a wonderful spotlight piece on all the stuff that's kind of come to Game Pass this week, including the likes of Halo Infinite, Stardew Valley, Among Us is up there as well, and my personal favourite lawn mowing simulator. And then just before the end, we'll have a quick talk with Lewis, who did our article of the week this week, which was a review of Ashen that came out in 2015. And then we'll conclude the show with a link to all our socials and everything else. So a lot to get through. But Chris, thank you so much for being on the show this week. What have you been up to since we were last talking?
So I think the main thing I've been playing is a ton of Fable 2, to be honest. Enjoying my Xbox finally being part of the clique. I have to say Game Pass is as amazing as I thought it would be. It's kind of amazing to just be able to boot up a game from like 10, 15 years ago and just relive that nostalgia, and it worked perfectly. And I mean, Fable 2 doesn't have any drastic improvements, but I mean, those loading times are just incredible. You spend something that would take you normally about 20, 30 seconds, you're there from location to location in 1 second, and it feels great. And although it doesn't run at a high frame rate, it feels silky smooth, at least at the 30 FPS. You never get any stutters or anything.
Yeah, I actually haven't. I don't think I've ever played a Fable game, which is blasphemous on my half because it's such a prominent Xbox title. But I've always heard people talk about it, and I know there's a lot of people begging for a remaster of the second game.
The second one I feel like is the most accessible, even though the first one was remade. I didn't grow up on the first one, so I didn't have the attachment that a lot of people did. I grew up on the second one, and I just remember as a child, it was one of those games that was like, it's one of those that captures your imagination. You start off as children, and it's this like really, it's a fairy tale world, and it's in Albion, in a very unique version of Albion. It's this. I just think it's one of those games that kind of captures your imagination. I remember there was a great, back when games used to do these kind of online websites and stuff where they had like interactive stuff. There was this great little amazing 20-minute adventure where it was like you were a marionette or puppets, I believe, and it was giving you the game's themes of morality in like 20 minutes before the game came out, and if you completed it, you got content unlocked in the full game, and there was even different endings to that were all based around the game's morality system. And it was just such a charming world, even if like things like combat's simplistic and stuff. It's just, I remember watching. It's one of those games you remember watching your sibling play as a kid, and you're just kind of like in awe at all the colors and the fascinating world, and then the little bit of darkness the game has as well that kind of adds to it. It's not all clean cut; it's a little bit dark, even if by today's standards it's quite tame and simplified.
Yeah, for sure. I know they're obviously working on a new Fable game at the moment, and I can't wait to see what that actually looks like. Just from a pure spectator standpoint of view, because I know it's being developed by Playground Games, who are obviously responsible for the Forza Horizon games, and if you've played any of those games, you'll know how beautiful they look. So I can't wait to see what they're doing on this new engine.
And Fable is a franchise that's been in dire need of some fresh creative voices. I mean, you've probably read or heard at times that the guy behind it, I think his name Peter Molyneux, was quite a character. And my understanding, at least this is my very basic understanding, is that he was a bit of one of those creatives who doesn't want to take too much from committee. So I think that kind of led to some of the issues people have with Fable 3, although I'm yet to go back. So I'm hoping when I go back to Fable 3, I'll enjoy it more than when I initially played it. But that was kind of the nail in the coffin for the franchise, unfortunately. I mean, they had all these other games afterwards, but that was the last true Fable game. So I'm hoping with some new blood on it, we'll kind of see a return to the form of like Fable 2, although, it'll be amazing with the technology they've got now, what they could do with it.
Yeah, and obviously now that you've got a Series S for the first time, what's it like kind of booting up Xbox Game Pass and kind of being, are you as overwhelmed as everyone else is when they kind of see that huge library of games?
I think the S is almost great in that because I have such a small hard drive space, it limits me from not downloading too much crap. So I've got like a pretty conservative collection. And funny enough, the first thing I downloaded when I got the Xbox wasn't even a Game Pass game. It was because I bought the Xbox just after the anniversary event. So I was like, and I saw that they'd remastered well, not remastered, but they brought Time Splitters from the Xbox Classic onto the Series S, and I had all these reward points left over. So the first thing I did was buy credit and buy Time Splitters, and I'm just like, that alone was like, even I know it's like, you're essentially just emulating, but the emulation is so damn good on the Series S. Time Splitters was already ahead of the curve for trying to run at 60 FPS on old hardware and look as good as it did. So playing it on a console that now can handle it and, doesn't have never frame rate drops and the loading times are instantaneous. It's just like you're seeing like a game that was, and I swear it even looks like it's at a better resolution because it looks decent on my telly. And that's a game that's so colorful, and another game that's getting a comeback as well, hopefully. That's so colorful and cartoonish, and the animations are so beautiful in that game that like seeing that brought back. So Series S so far has really impressed me. And I think as someone who wasn't an Xbox fan, I used to be when I had a 360. Although I don't think I've ever been a fanboy truly of either console. I think I would definitely recommend I would even say to people who are waiting for a PS5 but have a little bit of cash, or are happy to, if you're fortunate like me to get a good deal like I did, it's definitely worth the investment. If you want to have both this generation, this is probably the best generation ever to have both. Because if you're more of a PlayStation player and you want the full PlayStation experience, you want the high fidelity graphics and everything, and you want, not to snub the S at all, the S is amazing for what it is, but if you want both, basically the S is one of the best values I've ever seen in games. You're paying a fraction of the price of the other consoles, and you're still getting 60 FPS 1080p crystal clear visuals. You're playing Infinite at 60 FPS and you're not missing a beat with the X. The only difference is if you don't have the 4K display, which I know a lot of people don't actually still, then it's perfect for that. Like my new telly is a 1080p, HDR telly, which I'm very happy with, but it's not 4K. So, an S is a perfect choice for that kind of thing. So I would say that to anyone skeptical about the S, it's amazing. It's 100% worth it, and Microsoft have knocked it out of the park. And I think looking back on it in the future, I think people will almost be more impressed with the S because of what it offered for people who are on a budget.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, I've always kind of, at least with the S, I particularly like the fact that it's probably one of the most portable Xbox consoles we've ever had as well.
Oh yes, size
it's tiny, like, and you can just put it in your backpack and go anywhere with it. Whereas the X is very awkward to get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the PS5 is insane. I have a PS4 and it's opposite my Series S, and I'm just looking at it like, it's a fraction of the size. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's the one thing I thought when I got the PS5. I was like, oh my god, this thing is absolutely huge. I don't know where I'm going to put it. And even now, it occupies like a really big part of my desk. I'm not complaining though, because I know I'm one of the few that managed to get it. So I know I'm probably going to be, what is it? Arguing from an ivory tower in that standpoint.
Yeah.
But there was actually I had a very like opposite week to you in the fact that all I played this week was stuff on the PlayStation 5. I didn't touch my Xbox, which is probably the first time I've done that probably since I got the PlayStation 5, which was a couple of months ago now. But I've been infatuated. I always loved the original Spider-Man on the PS4, and I got Miles Morales there recently in the Black Friday sales.
Oh wow!
So I 100%ed that in 3 days. I love it so much.
I'm still yet to play Miles Morales. I don't want to play it until I get a PS5. As much as I'm sure the PS4 version is perfectly capable. It's just I might as well wait.
Yeah, no, I was the same as well, because I was half thinking about getting it for the PS4, but I was like, oh no, I'll want to experience this on the PlayStation 5 because it's clearly built for that.
Did you get the version with the PS5 remaster of the other one as well? Or?
No, I didn't get that. I got the disc version for £30.
Okay.
So I know the upgrade is about £20, but at the moment I don't really feel like I need to get that because I have the original.
I think it just unlocks all your trophies again as well, so it's not even the trophy collecting to go back to, as far as I know.
Yeah, but no, I will probably end up getting that at some stage and playing it over again, but for the time being, I'm happy with what Miles Morales offers. I don't even know if I went back to the original game.
I'm curious.
I be disappointed a little bit.
As someone who has a PS5, is the haptic feedback overhyped, or is it as good as people are saying? Because there's been a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, actually, it's not overhyped," but obviously that in itself is usually like a.
I think it's definitely noticeable. I don't think it's like, as someone who has played with, say, because I have I have the Elite Series 2 controller for
which
the
has
Xbox.
a little bit of that in
Yeah,
it, doesn't
so there's
it?
a little bit of feedback. But if I was to go, like, I haven't used my regular controller in a while, so I can't really say. But
Mhm.
if I was to say, like, I mean, if I play something like Halo Infinite, like vibration of like hitting someone or like falling or anything, like I think that's still felt. I think where the haptic feedback for like PlayStation really comes into play is in shooters mostly, so it wouldn't really be that big of a deal in Spider-Man because you obviously have that trigger resistance,
Mhm.
which I think is kind of cool. Sometimes it kind of annoys me because I'm like, it's needlessly making the game a bit more difficult for myself.
Yeah.
Like it's actually, I think the one game I've seen the trigger feedback used really well is Returnal, where it's
Okay.
like it'll use the trigger feedback to, if you have an all fire and a weapon, they'll both be bound to the right trigger. So the first time you pull it in, there will actively be like a stopping point midway in which you can like charge up a power shot, but if you hold it down even further, it'll just go to your regular fire, which I think is kind of cool.
Mhm.
Outside of that, though, I don't think it's been that big of a deal. It's definitely a nice thing to have. The other thing I kind of like as well is that, I don't know, I only noticed this today, is that like if you're playing Spider-Man, the controller will make like little subtle noises coming out of it if you like swing a web or something.
Yeah. I think the
Um,
PS4 had that as well.
yeah, it
But
definitely
obviously,
did.
I know that they've gone a bit further with this time. The only issue with my concern was always with gimmicks. Well, I don't want to say gimmick because I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, it's not actually a gimmick. It's it's the planned feature for the next 10 years, 5 years of PlayStation or whatever."
Yeah.
But there's always a concern that developers are either going to stop, like only first party developers are going to put the effort in for it. I feel like, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but that's like my cynical, it's going to be like,
I
you're going to get all
yeah.
these first party games where it's great and you get that whole, I mean, I've heard people say that Demon Souls is amazing for the
Hmm.
haptic feedback because your swings, this my understanding is your swings, the level of vibration you get varies depending on the material you're hitting and where you're hitting it. And it happens all over the controller. That's the rumor, as I've heard anyway, from the people who've used it. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't
Um,
be able to tell because I don't think I've ever gotten past the first boss battle in Demon
I
Souls.
am not a Souls fan at all. I have to say, it just
No.
doesn't do it for me.
I love the look and everything of it, and I think that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
visually
But
it's cool,
I'm just
but I
terrible at the
can't even
game.
really get into the lore, which saddens me because I know those games are very lore rich. But I'm just not a big fan of not pretty much zero story being given to you.
Hmm.
Indirect methods. I understand that there's like a balance to the structure. For me, I prefer a balancing. I prefer something more like how BioShock tells you its story, or Half-Life, where you get enough to go off if you just want to get the straight story, or if you want to dig into it more, then it's there for you, and it's still not just like a ton of like pieces of paper. It's like things like visual storytelling or audio logs. I love audio logs in games. I love good audio logs.
Yeah, for sure. I think when touching on the gimmick thing again, you're on about. I think it's a really perfect example is last generation on the PS4. Like no third-party game ever
The
used the
touchpad, yeah.
touchpad, and the
Yeah.
touchpad even for first-party titles was kind of like poor in a lot of sense because it
I
never
think
really came out apart from say like Detroit Become Human and like um what's that game called, the horror one where you're
Until
all
Dawn.
Until Dawn, yeah.
Do you
um
remember the PlayStation camera?
no, it's the PS2
PS4
one.
camera. No, the PS4 camera. So you don't even remember it because no one even knows. I think it came out at the beginning of the PS4's life cycle and was supposed to be when they thought Xbox was going to stick with Kinect, and then I guess once Kinect was abandoned, they were like, "Well, this isn't very good anyway." So
Yeah, well, I remember the iToy being an absolutely legendary system for the PlayStation 2 at least.
was it actually good?
I mean, maybe I was young and naive, but I thought it was always good whenever I had my cousins over to
I
play it.
thought, but then I played a Kinect long after it was kind of dead, and I thought it was fun. So I didn't really see the
Hmm.
issue with the Kinect either. I was kind of like, and I actually have always wanted to play the Kinect Star Wars just for the Dance Central minigame.
Yeah,
So I like those kind of games, but
my favorite thing about the Kinect was it was actually found out, I think it was a couple of years ago, and nobody ever knew that this was a feature. But in FIFA, if you had your Kinect connected to your Xbox, and you got really angry or started shouting at the screen, you would get in career mode, you would get an email sent to you being like, you've been fined or something because of like your rowdiness on the sideline. So the Kinect
God,
was obviously picking up people speaking, which I think is absolutely hilarious and also kind of scary at the same time.
that was such a bare bones implementation as well. I remember hearing how massive. The only game I ever wanted to play it with was Mass Effect 3, where you could call out to your teammates and use the biotic attacks without having to pull up a menu.
Hmm.
That was pretty cool, like being able to yell command. But then I think I'm not sure why that hasn't been a feature in like any game like that just with any headset. Like, surely that's
Yeah.
doable with.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in my mind that the whole idea of sort of gimmicks, I suppose gimmick software was kind of more so popularized by the Wii because it was such a departure
Yeah,
from
yeah, for sure.
normal consoles.
To be fair, it went all in as well. Every game
Yeah.
utilized it. There wasn't a single game that didn't. I mean, one of the best games on there. I don't know if you ever played the port of this or if you've even played the game at all. Resident Evil 4 was one of the best games on there just because of how satisfying the gunplay was when you could just point in rapid succession at the enemies.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably the same level of satisfaction you get out of the VR port now, where you can
Mm.
aim in any direction. And, you know, like that game was so good because the thing I always didn't like, it was very hard to play it on console afterwards because of the rigidness of the aiming. Whereas before I had this incredibly smooth, for me, that felt very accurate reticle, and I could just pop heads and then I could swing my, you know, if an enemy got too close, you could swing the Wii remote to knife them instead of having to press a button.
Yeah.
Or you could, you know, you shake the nunchuck to like reload instead of having to press buttons or change where your hands are on the buttons.
Mm-hmm. And like honestly, if you think about it, the Wii is probably, at least for people who aren't into video games, probably the one of the most accessible consoles.
Oh yeah, the amount of Wii Sports I played with my family on that same set of 5 mini games. Like Wii Sports is probably one of the best, you know, like included titles next to like something like Halo.
Yeah.
In terms of how good it was.
Yeah, because you don't even need to be even remotely coordinated with a normal
No,
controller, which is brilliant.
And like, yeah, and the motion controls for the time were really impressive. Like boxing and stuff like that was incredibly fun.
God,
baseball. I used to love baseball.
The baseball is very good, but I'm terrible at it. So
yeah.
Let's get on to the news piece before we go on any further with tangent. We were talking a bit about PlayStation. I think a really good segue would be onto the possibility of a new Game Pass style service coming to PlayStation. I am very excited
for this, if this is true.
Yeah, so I will just say that. So the article initially coming from Bloomberg, I believe, by Jason Shearer. I don't know how to say his surname, but my apologies.
I've always heard it as Schreier. I don't know.
Schreier, probably. PlayStation plans new service to take on Xbox Game Pass. The one thing I found interesting before we get into kind of the detail of this is that they have a tier service. Now, I know it's similar enough to how Xbox Game Pass do theirs, where you can have just Xbox Game Pass, which is like $9.99 a month, or you can have Ultimate, which of course includes Xbox Live as well. But this is a 3-tier pass, which I think is quite interesting. So the first would include PlayStation Plus benefits, which is just general stuff. So you'd have online, and then you can get your free games a month, which is kind of the standard at the moment. Second would include a larger catalogue of PlayStation 4 and eventually PlayStation 5 titles, which I think is kind of an implementation of that on PS Now, hopefully to a better degree than what PS Now is already. And then the third tier would be extended demos, game streaming, and a library of classic PS1, PS2, PS3, and PSP games.
I'm sold on that last tier already.
I am on one condition. I hope it's not streamed content like PS Now has.
Oh god, yeah.
If it's not fully integrated backwards compat stuff, I think it's going to be dead in the water for a lot of people because it's outside of, say, like the best places to have internet, like nobody is going to be able to access those games.
It's not even just that. PS Now is renowned. I don't know if you've heard this, but it's pretty much established that PS Now, even with a good setup, is still bad. It still isn't. Because you can play it, and it's entirely dependent on the game. I tried to play Red Dead Redemption on it, and I think I must have got like, it felt like the frame rate was dipping. It was so bad, and it was so, there was so much latency and lag, and in games like that where you're trying to enjoy it, and the picture quality was bad, and like, you know, the resolution because your streaming is worse. Same way when you play on, you know, I've played a bit of Game Cloud, how the resolution drops on that, but at least on that I felt the connection's a lot smoother. Like I played Forza Horizon 5 on my S on the cloud, and I don't even have the most stable internet, and it was pretty much no problem free. I played it for about 20 minutes, and it was pretty much fine. I even played a bit of State of Decay 2, which had a little bit more issues, but not anything major.
Now, obviously, this is kind of like, this hasn't even been confirmed yet officially, so this could be all hearsay. But the one thing I'm kind of noticing from the Bloomberg article is in the third tier it says extended demos, game streaming, and a library of PS1 games. So I'm thinking, is there game streaming as a side thing, and then they have all these other games you can access and download, or is it game streaming as in these games are now streamed, so like PS1, PS2, PS3? Because if that's the case, like PlayStation has notoriously had a really poor track record for when they do make games backwards compatible, they always tend to be broken in some way, shape, or form, that they're unplayable.
Yeah, I don't know if you played many of the ports that came to PS4. I've not really had any bad experiences with those, personally. I mean, I played a bit of Red Dead Revolver. It's ported on there. I mean, it's nowhere near. I will 100% agree that the ports of what Xbox has been able to do is far better, but it's like passable. So I would need. I think, yeah, like you say, if they're going to charge you monthly for this service needs to be. This needs to be on the level of Xbox, basically, where you're either getting boosted frame rates or steadier loading times, or a clearer picture, anything like that. And I don't know if that's possible, because I don't know if that's what it says in the art. From what I read, it kind of sounds like it. Obviously, it's up in the air at the moment how it's actually going to work. But my understanding when the PS5 was coming out was that the technology kind of isn't there for them to go backwards compat. They've now only just invested in the technology so that all PS4, everything going forward will be backwards compatible. They've kind of future-proofed themselves.
It's always it is kind of strange though, because like you think about one of the PlayStation 3s, you were able to play PS1 games and PS2 games on it.
I know. I remember that was always a big selling point, and I missed out on that because I had I almost wish I got a PS3 when I was younger, because then I would have had more reason to keep my collection of PS2 and PS1 games that are now costing me a fortune to recollect.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least I think, and this is probably, I say this without a form of bias, in fairness, like props to Xbox, who have made so many of their games available on this current generation that were from the original Xbox and beyond. I think they've done a really fantastic job, because companies at least like Nintendo and PlayStation have really kind of, I don't know, made the idea of emulation a lot more justifiable, because there is literally the idea, like I don't know if you remember when the PlayStation were on about shutting down the PS3 stores and the PSP store, or the PS Vita stores. And then after a load of backlash, they were like, oh no, we'll keep them up. And that was really weird, because if you think about it, that was only 2 generations ago. And obviously, I don't know about you, but I still on occasion play some of the 360 games. And I would think like, oh my God, if I didn't have access to them ever again, that would be extremely strange to not get to experience a lot of those titles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I still go home and throw on my PS2 and I will play like the original Time Crisis with a controller, because it's one of my favorite games ever.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And if PlayStation said to me, you could play that on your PS5, and hell, if they even brought out reintroduced like light guns into gaming, which I think they totally should do, if this is going to work, if this works as well as I idolize it to be, they should 100% see a return of that kind of thing, because there's so many games. They wouldn't even need to make new games. They've got so many classics that use light gun technology. If they could just make it work with a modern TV, then you're just printing money. I mean, there's people, the amount of clamoring for those kind of games to come back. There's even a guy in the UK has created a gun called the Sinden light gun that he charges $200 for, but people will pay it because it works on everything. So the technology is 100% there. That's something I'd like to see if this happens.
100%. I think in general though, this news is good for anyone who's a fan of games, because I think competition with these streaming services, or at least these sort of monthly subscription services, is the way forward for a lot of games companies, in particular consoles. And I like the idea that PlayStation will now kind of be moving. I don't know if they'll fully move. They definitely won't fully move away from the full $70 price tag very soon, I don't think, even if they do bring in this service. I'd be interested to see if they put a lot of their first party titles day one onto this service, or if it was like they'd do it after a couple of months or something like that. I think that would be the interesting thing to come out of this. Also though, I do want to mention, I think it'd be interesting to see what the prices will be like for this, because obviously a 3-tier system. Obviously Xbox only has 2, and it's about $12.99 a month in euros for a subscription to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So I'm interested to see what their prices will be, because if it's more expensive, I might be a little bit more like, oh, am I really in the position to be paying upwards of €20 a month for a game service? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, with it being 3 tiered as well, and unless they're going to drop the price, I mean, I think the best move they could do is maybe drop the price back down of the standard service now that there's going to be better ones. Maybe dropping the first tier down from like $6.99, I think it is at the moment, to something like $4.99. I think would be pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
I think and I think then you'd have the divide would be more on people on the top tier and people on the bottom tier, instead of having no one using the bottom tier, because maybe there's not enough value in it.
Yeah, I do always think it's weird though, because unless, as you mentioned, they do lower the regular price of PlayStation Plus, which I don't really see them doing. I can't
No,
imagine
I
they do
don't. To be
that.
honest, I think that's a bit of a
And
pipe
at
dream.
least if this is the way they go with it, and obviously again this is all speculation, I think it'd be really stingy for them to lock like classic PS3 and below titles
Behind
behind a tier. So I think like
Well,
the fact
hasn't
that
Nintendo done something like that recently?
well, Nintendo, I think it's the services you get. They've upped the sort of the monthly subscription they have for their sort of online service, but you get access to, is it the Nintendo 64 catalog as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think though generally, I think in comparison to other services, I'm not sure. Now this could be completely off the wall, and somebody, if they're listening, can either let me know over on Twitter or in the comments. I think their service as a whole per year is cheaper than both Xbox and PlayStation. So if that's the case, then I imagine that could be a little bit more justified. But I do remember seeing a lot of people annoyed at the fact that it was a bigger increase onto their
I
monthly
mean,
fee.
yeah, Ultimate Game Pass is definitely a hefty price. Although I have to appreciate Game Pass. Another thing that's great about it is the Xbox reward system is I think is a really fantastic program. I didn't even know about it until I got the Series S. Rewarding you for playing different games and stuff, and giving you those points, which I was able to get time splitters with. So I'm very happy with that. And then I'm now saving up enough to buy more Game Pass with it.
Yeah.
You can buy a full month of it with enough points, which is really impressive. I think stuff like that is still going to give Xbox the edge a little bit, but I mean, I'm very excited. It's better for everyone. I think this kind of thing is better for everyone now that they're finally feeling the pressure of Game Pass. I think it's good news for everyone, basically, if you're a gamer.
Yeah, for sure. I think we'll definitely keep an eye on that story, and hopefully more comes of it in the future. And it is something I'd like to see. But for now,
I still need to play the PS3 Ratchet and Clank. So yeah, if I can get
yeah.
those on my PS5, please.
Definitely, for sure. But for now, we'll move on to the next article, which is from thegamer.com, talking about the recent decision from Respawn Entertainment to delist Titanfall 2 in March 2022, but the servers will still stay online. Now, this is the idea that they're going to delist Titanfall, I believe, from all platforms, but for the most part, you're unable to buy it at the moment, if I'm correct in saying that, as it's been taken off the stores. I assume due to licensing and other agreements they've had with store companies such as Microsoft and Sony, that they had it up until there. The big question I think that arises from this is, obviously this game's only 7 years old. In fairness, I think the player base is probably relatively small, and most people are either playing Titanfall 2 or Apex Legends. But the interesting question to arise from this is, are these diverted resources for the first game going to be going towards possible Titanfall 3, or are they going to really double down on Apex Legends since its main popularity at the moment? I don't know. Are you a fan of the Titanfall series, Chris?
I have been meaning to play Titanfall 2 for so long. I don't have any interest in the first one because, I was there when the first one came out, and I remember hearing, oh, the multiplayer is great, but the story's like non-existent. So, and it seems like Titanfall 2 seemed to pretty much fix every problem ever people had with Titanfall and make it like what is now considered a cult classic because of it. It's a game that has lived well past how long it should have. It's had so many resurgences because people are saying it's one of the best multiplayer shooters ever made.
Yeah.
And that it's got one of the best first-person shooter campaigns of all time.
I think some of the highest praise I've heard
for
Titanfall 2 has been that a lot of people have kind of compared it to this era's Half-Life, which I think is maybe a little bit much, but I mean, that might be me speaking from the perception of, there's such a godlike status put on the Half-Life series at this stage that it's almost impossible to meet someone's expectations on that. But I think it is a phenomenal story-driven first-player campaign, and it's not even that long, so if you're looking to get into it, now is the time. And obviously, with that comes the obvious addition of people looking for a third entry into the series. Apex Legends as well has obviously been doing fantastic. I think it'll really tell the direction that Respawn is looking to go, whether they divert funds, because it may be more the case, obviously, being involved with other companies. EA previously had said that the single player genre was kind of dead, and I think that was kind of proven wrong by the fact that Jedi Fallen Order did so well. I am interested if Respawn will possibly look at getting back into this single player narrative elements. It's something that was really praised in Titanfall 2. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, the whole single player thing is very confusing to me because not only did we get a game like Jedi Fallen Order that everyone is kind of proven them wrong. I think small titles, things like Days Gone, like highlight to me that if single player was to die, I think gaming for me would lose most of its appeal. So I hope that never happens because So with Titanfall, I hope that they're not moving away from single player experiences, even though I haven't played Titanfall, because it seems like they could be a pretty good voice for the industry in terms of single player, especially for first person shooters. But it's hard because I don't know how much say they have in all this. It seems like they're quite, once Apex took off, it's kind of like, how much say do they have anymore?
Yeah.
Maybe there would have been a Titanfall 3 if Apex hadn't become like the phenomenon that it is.
I think the biggest problem is, at least for me, with the explosion, I suppose, of titles like Apex Legends, COD Warzone, Fortnite, I suppose, to a lesser extent, I want to mention, is the fact that those games now at least tend to be really rampant with hackers online, especially Warzone, and I think Apex Legends has certainly had its problems in that regard as well. I am very much, I don't know, I'm interested to see if they do continue with Apex Legends. I think they'd have to really double down on being extremely, I suppose, cutthroat with the likes of hackers online, and it's very difficult in a sense to try and ban people like that. I know Call of Duty is a notoriously poor track record with doing that as well. But again, I'm not really going to comment on, I suppose, the capabilities of a AAA company. But yeah, I would be disappointed if they didn't continue doing single player stuff, because I think Respawn especially have a really fantastic eye for storytelling. At least from when I played Titanfall 2, I thought it was a fantastic game.
My understanding, I mean, remember, this is years ago now from when Titanfall 1 was coming out, but aren't a lot of or at least a lot of the people who used to work there, I don't know if they still do, weren't a lot of them part of the Half-Life team? Or was it because those guys,
that is where I think that's where the comparison comes from, them being the successor to Half-Life, the spiritual one, at least. I believe, at least in my mind, they are, I suppose, the team of Half-Life 2 as to what Turtle Rock were to Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think definitely, if you were to ask me which team did a better justice of kind of, I suppose, being the spiritual successor to their
sounds like Titanfall
beginner, I would think Titanfall would be a fantastic example.
I think with and I think I agree with you, and I wonder if part of that's from the fact that I wonder if Left 4 Dead had such the charm that it did because it came from Valve, because at a point Valve, I still would hold them as one of the best in storytelling in gaming. I don't really think they've ever had a miss with their storytelling.
I think the main thing is whenever the conversation comes up about like former studios leaving Valve and then going on to work on sort of similar IP style projects, but obviously not in the same universe, the thing is always like, oh, these are the creators of this genre. Whereas Valve do contribute a lot to those genres. Like Valve are an instrumental part of Left 4 Dead in the same way that they are Half-Life and Counter-Strike. But I think in terms of Turtle Rock, I'm very much convinced that Valve played a very much bigger role than people are kind of led on to believe. In Left 4 Dead initially, and that's why probably it's lost some of that identity in Back 4 Blood. But this is getting a little off track though from the whole Titanfall discussion. Again, I think it's an interesting I think it's an interesting piece. I think that maybe people should be worried about stuff like this. I don't know if personally I'm too worried about the fact that it's going offline. Funnily enough, I think the only time I've ever experienced a game that I've been heavily, attached to going offline was the original Halo and Halo 2 servers going offline. But that was obviously only a couple of years ago. But obviously the Halo 3 servers and all that are going offline. And it's weird to think that we're in that stage of gaming now where the 360 multiplayer games are now a thing of the past. It seems almost weird. It seems like it's not been that long.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with the Titanfall thing overall is that I think, this is a complete guess, but it feels to me, I wonder if, because Titanfall has become such a beloved kind of cult franchise, that just the idea of losing one of them, I mean, there's only two, so just the idea of losing, half that franchise is pretty devastating to people, because I think a lot of people might have made their minds up that there might not ever be a Titanfall 3. So I think it's quite I think people were hoping that could be preserved, because then they'd always have both parts of the franchise.
I mean, if Half-Life is anything to follow, maybe in 10 years' time we'll get a VR Titanfall game. So we'll have to wait and see.
Oh god, I want to play that game so badly.
Let's move on again to our next story, which is kind of going away from the, I suppose, the death of a video game franchise and going to the possible birth of 35 new games, which is that the fact that there are now 35 game demos that are set to come to Xbox as part of the Game Awards. This is a piece, of course, from ID at Xbox, who were talking a little bit about the at this year's Game Awards, which airs on Thursday the 9th. Yes, Thursday the 9th. They're going to be showing off 35 demos that are coming up for release. Now, they're not all going to release that night. Some of them will be, I think, coming along that week. But there will be a timed event starting from December 7th and running through to December 21st, in which you can play some of these unreleased games. Notably, though, they're not typical game demos in the sense that they're kind of finalized projects. They'll be kind of earlier builds of games that will get sort of, I suppose, more complete demos later on. I think this is a fantastic job because I noticed a few of these games on these lists have already been put into early access on Steam, and I love to see sort of Steam games being, or at least PC games traditionally being brought over to Xbox for people to experience. And ID at Xbox, I think, have done a fantastic job with getting demos to people, which I think is also, as we talk about dying things in gaming, demos seem to have been a dying art up until recently.
Oh god, yeah.
I'll just mention through the 5 that we know of so far. All of which sound and look fantastic. The first one is Loot River, and I'll just read the quick description of it. Set in a series of procedurally generated labyrinths, Loot River is a dungeon-crawling action roguelike that combines the tense real-time combat and dark fantasy stylings of Dark Souls with the spiritual block-shifting puzzles of Tetris. I mean, that has me sold already, and if you can see the picture, if you look at the article that we have linked down below, you'll be able to see it's kind of more of a pixelated, sort of moody atmosphere, which I really, really love. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of roguelikes. Hades was a very big exception, but I'm sure I'll be looking forward to that. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
So I really like roguelites, but I the whole Tetris idea doesn't. I don't know. I mean, maybe obviously visually it might be pretty cool in the game, but I'm not 100% like on that. But that's just like a personal thing. I do really enjoy roguelites though, so it does have my interest in that regard.
For sure. The next one I was looking at, and this is a game I've actually played, and we'll have a review on the site very soon for, is Death Trash, which is very much prominent on Steam at the moment, if any of you have seen that. So, a brief rundown featuring a post-apocalyptic world where cosmic horrors long for humanity, but are met by punks with shotguns. It combines old-school role-playing, modern action gameplay, and player freedom. Create your own character and explore this unique handcrafted world. Now, what I would describe this as is pixelated Fallout on LSD. I think it's a fantastic game. From what I played of it, it's in early access, as I mentioned, at the moment, and obviously the creator is looking at doing this demo, so maybe we're close to the completion of the title, which would be brilliant to see. But Death Trash is a really fun, interesting, and engaging title with lots of different narrative side quests. Again, as I mentioned, akin to Fallout. Have you heard anything about Death Trash?
I have seen quite a bit of it on Twitter. I've yet to try it out, but given this demo kind of sounds like the perfect opportunity, really, to have a look at it. Because if you tell me that there's a cosmic horror in a game, then I'm pretty much there.
I think for sure. I don't think it's a very hardware demanding game either, so it's definitely worth even looking at if you have a lower spec PC, even if you can't wait for Death Trash on Xbox. Blacktail is the next one, a retelling of Baba Yaga's origin story set in a surreal, grim Slavic folklore, a one-of-a-kind blend of exploration and intense archery combat with dark storytelling. Become a fearsome guardian of the forest, or the terror nightmares are based on. I don't know. I don't know the origin story of Baba Yaga, so I'm not going to try and even mention anything about that. But again, a sort of first-person archery style thing. I think it seems to be becoming quite a norm now to kind of have almost medieval / Stone Age like elements mixed in with first-person action, or at least open world role playing. I think Valheim is a good example of that. Obviously not medieval, but at the same time, kind of that sort of old inspired elements of kind of primitive weapons, as opposed to before you put the S in FPS, I suppose.
Yeah. I think, the Baba Yaga thing is probably the thing that I'm most intrigued on. That I kind of like I like this thing we're seeing recently in media, especially with films like Antlers and stuff, of using like folklore for darker stories or in some cases horror.
Mm-hmm.
So anything with creepy folklore, you've got me.
Yeah, I think definitely that genre seems to be coming into style. I think again, stuff like the Babadook and all that sort of thing have kind of really popularized that element of horror, which I'm kind of interested to see how this game handles it. I don't know if it'll be more so horror as it is kind of just more gritty. Um, but I suppose that's what demos are for, and we'll wait and see. The Tale of Biston, a story-driven action adventure game inspired by the 12th century tragic poem Khosrow and Shirin. You play as a stone carver who walks on Mount Biston with no memory of anything before that moment. An insidious blight has spread, bringing forth many dangerous foes. You must battle through mythical enemies and travel between the real world and an ethereal place of forgotten memories to discover the secret of your past. Okay, I have a very big gripe with sort of game plots that revolve around your character having amnesia just to kind of set the tone. I think it's a now I'm again no hate to the person who made this. I'm sure it like the visual art style that I'm looking at looks really cool. And I'm sure I'll give it a go as the demo comes out. But I don't know. I feel like that story element has been done to death in games. But maybe this will add something new to it. Thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, story-driven action games can kind of go one or two ways. It can be something that I really love, like if it's focusing more on the narrative and less on the core gameplay, like The Last of Us, or or it can be something that I'm not as big into as something like Uncharted. So I'm interested, but and I do actually quite like the amnesia thing. I'm more usually I like an amnesia twist if it's like going for like a gut punch. I quite like that,
Mm.
but then that's like me being sappy, so I can enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. Final one then here is Nobody Saves the World, a complete quest to discover and swap between more than 15 varied and distinct forms, mix and match abilities to unlock and complete even more challenging quests while exploring a vast overworld and its extensive dungeons, either solo or with a friend online to stop the calamity and save the world. I don't know if the demo will have online, but that certainly intrigues me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think any sort of online game almost intrigues me, especially if it's not at a very high price.
Yeah. I can't. I mean, the way you describe it, is it a dungeon crawl? Does it say? Or
It doesn't
kind of
say.
sounds like one. Just because it's
Mhm.
saying like the different forms and the mix and match and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
Wondering.
definitely something a bit more to look into after.
Yes,
But with that being five of them, obviously that's only 5 of 35. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the other 30 are going to be, and
definitely.
I'm sure there'll be stuff in there that I'll be dying to jump into as well. Uh, I think it's a great thing as well. At least from all the games that have been mentioned here so far, all of them have such a unique look to them that you wouldn't see in the generic AAA shooter. And it's always nice with ID at Xbox games that they offer that element of variety into the Xbox market, and that they are heavily promoting at the moment is even better. Particularly in the year that we've had, where indie games have kind of dominated up until I suppose November, really, isn't it? Um, and now everything is kind of, I suppose, AAA games are really kind of pushing themselves out there. Um, yeah, but I think we can leave the element of that story and move on to another
Mm-hmm.
Xbox
Sounds good.
era project. This will be one you'll be excited about, Chris. Is that season 5 of Sea of Thieves is out. There's a lot of new
Yes.
elements. Firstly, I think the main element that will intrigue a lot of players is that you now have the ability to bury treasure and also find other players' treasure, whereas before it was just by NPCs you could find them. But it also gives you the option as well to create treasure maps, put them on a quest board, people can find them and then go look for them. But there is also the option of just leaving a dynamite or something there as well, either for them to find. What are your thoughts on this? I know you're a big Sea of Thieves fan.
So I've been out of Sea of Thieves for a few months. I've played it a ton during lockdown. So first of all, I have to say, like, if anyone has any doubts that the game, is still that game that came out a few years ago and really let people down, just put those away straight away. It's one of the best social games ever created. Honestly, the time that playing that during lockdown was one of the biggest like ways that I connected with my uni friends. So I just want to say like that game on that achievement alone is incredible. And in terms of this new update, they just continue to pile on more great content for this like amazing expansive world that is you know it's probably going to outlast this generation as well if it keeps going as successfully as it has. It's Microsoft's most new successful IP of the entire last generation. It was their most successful new IP. It's millions of players. So it's great. It's basically a free to play game without a lot of the issues that come with free to play games. With it being available on Game Pass. One concern I had was that it's got a battle pass system in it now, but I've now seen that, from my understanding, all the battle pass content is actually free. You just have to unlock it, like you would any other battle pass. There's no extra fee. Don't quote me on that. That's my understanding. That's how the trailer portrays it, at the very least. The trailer is excellent. I think everyone should watch the trailer if they're interested. The burying treasure thing's great. It's adding more to the feeling of it. The game has fixed its problem of not rewarding PvP, but it definitely is focusing more on building a community and emphasizing how good it is to work together in that game. The kind of encounters you can have in that game are incredible. Like, I remember I played by myself, and this boat pulled up alongside me, a galleon, and I was absolutely terrified because it was like 4 people. I didn't actually have any gear, but I was like, they're going to sink my ship, aren't they? And then this rowboat comes out to me, and then all I hear is, "We need to talk." And I'm like, oh my god. And then I get on the boat, and the bloke just says, "Right, we're going to form an alliance." And I was like, okay. And that allows you to share winnings. So now I'm sailing around by myself, and I'm just passively earning income with this full crew of guys who are going off and doing much harder jobs that I couldn't do by myself. And now I'm just passively earning income. So the game is brilliant in its community building. And now you can fire off fireworks and have celebrations, which is great. It's going to get a lot of people gathered together, I'm hoping. We're seeing full servers of people having a party, essentially. Shooting off fireworks. You can it's things that will be smaller in other games really matter in this game. Like, they made a joke out of it in the trailer, but they're like, you can now sit. But like, for what kind of game it is, that's actually an amazing feature, because it's not just certain objects. You can sit on the edge of your ship, you can sit on the edge of a dock, you can sit on chairs at a bar with your friends while you're drinking grog. Your voice, your lips move when you're talking now, so you get even more immersed into the world. It makes role playing a lot better now that you can sit down and chat and drink and stuff. And you have a successful haul, so you decide, I'm going to go out to the middle of the ocean and fire off a firework display, and everyone in the server can see it and kind of enjoy it. And then you've got things like smoke signals that you can send out now, so you can be even more strategic than before. You can signal an enemy ship's coming to your teammates. They keep adding things that just make the game better, and they haven't really added anything that's made it worse. So yeah, I just continue to praise the guys at Rare, who are just making took a game that a lot of people considered a failure and made it into one of the best games of last and probably this generation.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I had tried out at some stage in the past, but it sounds like I really need to get back into it because they've added a load since I played.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, the only thing I want them to add, and I hope that they maybe one day will do it, and this is just a personal thing because I really enjoy those kind of monsters. They need to add more sea monsters. I don't know, they probably haven't, because mechanically they've probably done all they can with sea monsters, but I still want to see more. Because those sea monster battles are incredible. When you're sailing back to an island and a megalodon comes up behind you, it's the most tense experience. Or when you see the water turn dark and tentacles come out of the water and you're being attacked by the Kraken, like, it's so engaging, and I just want to see more of that. But I mean, otherwise I can't really complain about the game in any regard. It has microtransactions like any other game, like any game like this, but I feel like it's kind of earned that right. They're adding all significant content is free with new achievements, new quest lines. I mean, they just added Pirates of the Caribbean to the game. And not just in a skin. I mean, they are actually adding more Pirates of the Caribbean post that launch as well. They've added Barbossa's outfit to the game now, and more references to that series, which is great. They gave you a fully fledged Pirates of the Caribbean campaign, which is probably better than any Pirates of the Caribbean game we've ever had. So, those guys can do no wrong at this point. I just hope that Sea of Thieves, I don't want a sequel. I don't think we'll ever need a sequel, at least not for a few years. We won't want to start from square one again. I think that game just needs to keep going on as what it is. I mean, its visuals are going to be timeless. It's got some of the best visuals on the generation.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a really brilliant example of, everyone talks about the likes of No Man's Sky that had a fantastic turnaround. This is probably
on that
to
level.
that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Same enough, yeah. And I think it's really brilliant to see that it's continuing to strive and do well. I think it's probably even a flagship example of how to use Game Pass as well, because obviously it would be very difficult for people to really get into this game again if they had to pay for it. And I think the fact that you can passively get into it through Game Pass, I think is a brilliant example of that as well. But yeah, I don't know. Will you be planting explosive barrels or planting actual treasure, Chris?
Honestly, I'll probably be still selling my treasure because I'm not good enough at the game to risk giving it away, to be honest. But maybe one day. There is definitely an incentive there. They've done a really good job of incentivizing good behavior.
Yeah.
So hopefully. But
Hmm.
planting barrels is fun. The best thing to do in that game is to sneak on someone's boat and plant a barrel and then light it while they're off on doing their little thing, and then they just watch their ship go up in flames.
Yeah. There is the other thing as well. Obviously, you mentioned the season pass. That is free to all players, but there is also the addition of a new plunder pass with premium rewards.
Okay, fair enough.
So I assume that that's a paid experience.
Probably, but
Um,
I feel like I can let it. I don't know. Like I'm someone who can kind of let it slide with certain games with microtransactions. I feel like Sea of Thieves has probably done enough to earn it. It's given enough free content, significant content to, you know, it didn't lock anyone out of the Pirates of the Caribbean thing, which would have been an easy sell for like, $10 DLC.
yeah,
It just gave it to you for free. So I don't really think. I think they can. I think a battle pass is fine, even if it's a paid one. I think that's fine.
yeah, for sure.
There's enough. There's more than enough content there on offer for free.
Hmm.
And if you have Game Pass, you haven't even bought the game. So
I think what is actually, as we move on, what is turning into an almost Game Pass centric episode. Our spotlight piece for this week was going to be initially Stardew Valley, but then we decided we'd talk about all the amazing games that are coming to Xbox Game Pass over the coming month. I'm going to name off a few that probably some people would be extremely interested in about. There's Among Us is coming to console for anyone who's still playing that game. Final Fantasy 13-2 is also coming to console and PC. Stardew Valley coming to cloud, console, and PC. Halo Infinite, again, cloud, console, and PC. One that I'm particularly excited for is Aliens Fireteam Elite, which is now coming to Game Pass on both cloud, console, and PC.
Finally play
it. A game actually that Connor, Callie, and I had been playing for quite some time when it initially came out because of our love of the Aliens franchise. So we're really excited to see that more people will be able to play that, because the last time we were looking at that had an extremely poor player count, at least retained player count. So hopefully that, along with its Season 2, which is coming out on the 14th of December, will be able to generate a lot bigger gaming experiences for players on Xbox. Any particular one jumping out to you there on the list that be coming out this month?
Other than Aliens, because I haven't played it yet. Obviously Stardew Valley. I think I've not finished that game. I probably never will. And I wasn't even big into the genre before I played that game. But that is the quintessential. Like, first of all, if you're looking to get in that genre, that is the game to play. It's probably. I mean, I haven't played the other ones like Animal Crossing and stuff, so I can't comment. But for me, for what I want in that kind of game, I think that's probably the best example we'll ever have of it until the spiritual successor comes out from the same developer.
Yeah.
In terms of character, the character writing, and actually giving you relationships to invest in the game, actually giving characters backstory instead of them just being people who stand and talk at you. You actually get cutscenes, you get major events where you get really invested in these characters, you get to know them really well. They have their own little story arcs, which I really love. And the almost how therapeutic the game is. If you're someone who gets stressed easy, it's a really great game to put on. And it's not just you're not doing the same activity over and over again. You're still doing tons of different things, but there's just a vibe of the game of positive, kind of energy that it just makes you feel really good. And the visuals are gorgeous. I love the pixel art of the game. I'm not a huge pixel art fan, but there's something about the vibrant summers and how good the winter looks in that game that just really it feels cozy. It's a great game to play, I think on any system, but I think PC I've really enjoyed it on. I'm curious to see how I enjoy it on console.
Yeah, 100%. I think my only experience with Stardew was at the beginning of lockdown when a few friends of mine started to play it, and I was hopeless at it and didn't know how to play, so I ended up just going over to other people's houses and stealing their furniture and putting it in a cave. To their dismay, when they came back and got very annoyed to notice that their entire house was cleared out. So I played it more as a thief simulator, but what can you do? You
can even play it that way.
Yeah. Always finding new ways to play Stardew. I think it'll be no surprise to anyone that I'm extremely excited for Halo Infinite to come out next week. If you heard Connor and I on last week's podcast, you'll know we gushed about the multiplayer and both the amazing parts of it and the bits that need to be improved. But with the campaign coming out, that's very much the bread and butter for myself and Connor. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. Obviously, Chris, you had a bit of an experience with us playing multiplayer. Are you a bit more hopeful for the campaign?
I I want to like Halo again so badly. I just see the enthusiasm and I'm like, oh, I really want to get into this. And I so I don't know where you feel on this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with Halo Infinite as a game. It seems like it's pretty great. But for me, I don't know if you feel this way, if you'd agree with me, but I almost feel like there is almost a barrier to entry with this game, with the new one especially, of how good the other players are. These are obviously the amount of fans of this franchise that have played it for the last 15 years or so, or however long it's existed, that have been loyal to the MCC collection and have played even 5, the game, after it got improved. And my understanding is that a lot of people went back to 5 as well. And then you play Infinite and you're like someone who hasn't played Halo since Halo 3, you just get creamed. And it kind of takes away from the enjoyment a little bit. I can't really like have a casual game of it because if I'm not 100% focused on it, I'm just going to get destroyed and get like 1 kill. And I'm not just saying that the game's fault. Obviously, I'm not very good at the game, but it feels like there's a higher skill ceiling than a lot of other first-person shooters, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I generally,
but
I generally would have always thought that Halo was kind of more of a more complex shooter because you have to manage the element of shields, which not a lot of other shooters have. Like Call of Duty doesn't have that. Like the time to kill is obviously a lot higher. I don't know if I would personally consider Halo Infinite to be a difficult game in comparison to other Halo titles. I think they've all kind of had that same similar level of skill. You're obviously going to get into your games where there's just people who are just 10 times better than you, I think. And it's all down to luck of the draw. I know Connor and I recently had a session where we were just playing and we were just losing after losing because the people we were coming up against were amazing. But I think COD has had a similar sort of thing in the last few years. I think Battlefield especially does that as well. I think it's all about familiarity of the game and its structure. I know if I go into a game of Battlefield, which is not a game I play very often, I will just get absolutely smoked. I don't think I can have a decent
that's
casual
true.
game.
I've not always had the best with that.
FPS games are always strange though because I think there's an ease of access into it, but the skill ceiling, it's easy to get the basics down, but there's a really big high ceiling for becoming an expert at it, which is I think an appealing aspect to Halo Infinite specifically. And I'll be interested to see what happens. I am always very interested because I see there's just elements of gameplay or at least these little attentions to detail that I would never notice then that people are pointing out. If you see a drop shield in Halo Infinite, if you shoot the bottom square, you can then blow up the actual shield generator itself, so the whole shield disables as opposed to just having to shoot each square, which I didn't know about until somebody pointed it out. I thought that's kind of cool. You obviously see people using the grapple hook in extremely weird ways that I never could pull off. But I think the campaign would be a good way of gauging in your interest in the game, especially because it's such a it's going to be a sort of more streamlined experience.
I think the only issue I have with that is I'm out of the loop with Halo's plotline, so I might have to, and I don't know if I really want to play 4 and 5 that much.
Who isn't, in fairness,
So I have to see. I'm certainly intrigued. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and I will hand it. It's definitely. I think I can safely say it's probably going to be the number 1 shooter of the year. I don't think there's much competition.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Yeah, less said about those games the better. But
yeah, no, but a load of good games. Again, it's a really interesting thing to see that these games are both coming to obviously console and PC, but then cloud as well. Which
the cloud stuff is really cool.
Yeah, it's something I've never really utilized again because obviously streaming internet is always a hassle, and then I don't have an Android either, so playing it is just virtually impossible. I don't know if they've worked at getting an iOS system up in place, but maybe that'll be an informed decision I make when I get a new phone. I think it works I think Connor initially said he played LA Noire on it and it was fine, but it wasn't exactly, you wouldn't want to be playing a fast-paced game on it.
Yeah.
I am interested though this month. Obviously Aliens Fireteam, for those who haven't played it, to really give a look. Halo Infinite will be fun. God, there's so much stuff I have to play. That's the one thing that's really just boggling my mind is how much stuff is coming out. I think about it, at least the stuff I'm very interested in recently is both films and games wise. Let's talk about this December. We have Halo Infinite coming out. Hawkeye has already started. Spider-Man comes out later on, and then The Witcher season 2 comes out. So December is already crammed with stuff for me.
I'm only going to watch Hawkeye if it does the crossover I'm hearing that they're going to do. If it does that, I'll have to watch it.
Okay. I will let you know. Which are you thinking?
It's bringing back that character from the Netflix universe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
With
Okay.
that actor.
I know exactly what you're on about, yeah. And there has been a little few elements where it's kind of been hinted at.
If they do
I
that, then
I think it's all right to say it's not exactly a spoiler to say that there might be a crossover with Wilson Fisk from Daredevil.
he just as long as he looks at the camera and I've heard rumors that he might be massive as well. And if he's massive, I just need him to look into the camera and just say Vanessa over and over again, and then I'll watch the show. There's
For
something
easy bar
the
there.
way he uttered that word just tickled me. I don't know what it was. I just found him very. I love him in that show, and I'm not like saying he's like a meme character, but he is a little bit meme worthy.
Yeah. But yeah, let's move on then. Finally, earlier this week, I talked to Lewis Dupe, who does writing for our website for our shout out article of the week, which of course this week is our Ashen review by Lewis. I'm going to hand you over to myself talking in the past now to Lewis about that article, a bit about the game itself and whether you should pick it up or not. First, we're going to have a quick ad break and then we'll get into that interview. Enjoying the show so far? Why not support this podcast and all the amazing work we do over on Gaming Sandbox by donating to our Patreon? Your support ensures that we can keep bringing you the latest news, reviews, and interviews in an easy to understand and fun way. Check out the top link in the description or visit www.patreon.com/Gaming Sandbox. Obviously, Lewis, this week you reviewed Ashen, which is developed by A44 and then published by Annapurna. People will kind of be familiar with Annapurna from like The Artful Escape, 12 Minutes, Outer Wilds, that sort of stuff. Where was your first sort of exposure to Ashen? What's it all about? Give us sort of a quick rundown of it.
Right, so with Ashen, I don't remember exactly where I first saw it. I mentioned in the article about it being revealed at like E3 2015. That may have been that, or one of the years afterwards. I just saw it briefly at E3, probably just while watching other videos about the topic and just seeing like a small amount of buzz coming towards it, but not like a massive amount. It was more just something that was looked at for its unique kind of art style and character design.
Mm-hmm. And sort of, what's the story about Ashen? What is it what sort of world is it inhabiting, and kind of where does it lead from there?
It's inhabiting like what I feel like is a very like emerging subgenre, or well, has been about for a while, of sort of like a world that has been reintroduced after some kind of great calamity. It's essentially the type of world where it starts like it's starting again from nothing, and you have to kind of build back up, but while also finding out about what happened in the past. Sort of post-apocalyptic in that sort of sense, but also like new beginnings, I guess is the best way to word it.
Yeah, for sure. I know that the art style you mentioned in the interview, or in the review, sorry, was sort of one of the big things that a lot of people recognized about it. What did you think of the art style? Was it something that initially drew you towards it?
I definitely was intrigued by it. More so, I thought, like with the lack of faces on the characters, which is not like a brand new motif as far as like media goes. There are a lot of places that do that, but it's just I was interested to see like if they could really make the characters ultra engaging while doing that. But it turned out that wasn't really the case with the game. Like it does have some half decent characters and side quests to go along with them. But it's just that's not the entire focus. It was very much a gameplay focused game rather than going for
I know
an atmospheric world.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in the review as well, obviously, and a couple other reviews I've seen about Ashen have kind of compared it to the Dark Souls series, Souls-like series, and kind of you mentioned some of its inspirations in the actual review. What do you think of that comparison of Ashen to Dark Souls?
I mean, it feels like a very, very easy comparison to make. Like, I know it's an entire meme on the internet right now of, oh, this thing is Dark Souls because difficult, but this is not a case like that. This really does wear like its influence on its sleeve. And as someone who's not the most familiar with like From Software games, I have played some of Bloodborne. Like as soon as I started up Bloodborne, I could see where the influence had come from, and like even if you're just vaguely familiar with it, like how the menus work, the equipment systems, the weapons, everything of that sort, it has the exact same kind of vibe to it, as well as the currency system needing to be found again after death or fought an enemy for, which, I don't know if Dark Souls originated it, but that's definitely popularized it more, as you see it in other games all the time as well, like Hollow Knight and the like.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, one of the things that kind of stood out to me from your review is that it has a multiplayer aspect to it, where on certain quests you can either be accompanied by an NPC or another player can actually jump in and fill that role. What did you think of the multiplayer sort of side of Ashen?
I don't think it was bad. I just think they went for an approach of like minimalism in terms of the multiplayer, but it didn't quite work in terms of it being multiplayer itself. Because it's sometimes hard to tell if you're actually playing with another player or an NPC because it doesn't exactly tell you, and the other player would appear as one of the NPCs that would usually follow you around. In those terms, it was kind of like it didn't feel as much like, I know that's probably the intention, was for it not to feel like you're being like carried hard by someone else who's played the game more, or having to help someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But at the same time, it didn't feel fully realized. Like, it was a good start, I guess is the best way to put it, but I feel like it could have had a bit more to it.
Mm-hmm. Did you find when playing that, the game was a little bit easier with and obviously a real person as your sort of backup in that sense, or was it a little bit more difficult because the NPC probably don't have as much, I suppose they don't get affected as much by enemy damage in that sense because they are a non-playable character?
It felt relatively even, but it felt more like it was easier when it was another player, or I could tell it was another player. Because usually the NPCs, like, they have decent AI, but are also not the most helpful when it comes to like reviving you, because that is a system that happens when there is another player about, or an NPC. But the other players seemed more willing to do that rather than the AI.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that the game overall does well? Like, what are the key aspects you pick out from your time playing it that you thought, okay, they did that really well?
I feel like it really does reward you for kind of investing into the side quests, or just investing into looking around the world. Mainly through finding better equipment or getting more currency in which to build up the kind of hub world. Vagrant's Rest, that was what it was called, where you build that up as to like its own mini town, kind of like going into the game's themes of like rebirthing a world where you're just basically making your own small settlement. And as I mentioned in the review, that's one of my favorite parts. I just wish it could have been done to somewhat of a bigger scale, I guess, or that there could have been a bit more variety in the world itself. Although when there is variety in like the world design, it is really, really good.
Mm-hmm. One of the big things that kind of drew a lot of people to this game with the trailer was sort of the boss battles, the sort of the challenging enemies. Was there any particular one that stood out to you as being memorable?
Yeah. That's an interesting question in terms of my experience, because I felt like I had two very memorable experiences, but they are not with like real boss battles. They were just random happenstances early on in my experience. As I mentioned, not me, being someone not too familiar with Soulsborne type games. There was one enemy specifically, like near where you start the game, on like a massive rock that you kind of like use to go over stuff. Like, I'll go over a river, I think it was, when there's other enemies all around it. So it's essentially a one-on-one on this cliff, real samurai movie style. And he was a real big challenge, but I felt amazingly good at the game when I was able to beat him, even though in retrospect he's not that hard. It's just I was there too early to fight him. And the same thing kind of happened with one of the enemies, like that's like essentially a shadow demon right next to the spawn, which right next to where you start, even not the spawn, which, they are not meant to be fought that early. You're meant to come back to that cave very, very late on in the game. But just finding that there and just getting absolutely destroyed made me realize, like, yeah, this game ain't pulling any punches.
Do Do you think, with your experience of the game, was there anywhere that the game particularly fell short, or was it kind of more so just little bits that kind of hampered the experience?
I don't feel like there's anywhere it fully falls short altogether. It's more of just like a combination of things that I feel like with time or a sequel could have been improved just enough to make it just that bit more memorable. I do believe it is a good game. It just doesn't fully like realize the potential, I think is the best way to word it. Although, if I am to say one complete fault, which I regret not including in my review, but it does feel slightly like spoilers, the final boss is not well designed. I will say that much.
Okay. Who should be looking out to play this game? Kind of who's the core audience you think that would really get something out of this?
I feel like the people like me when I first played it are probably going to be like the people that really will get the most out of this. Those are the people that are looking for a game that is a challenge, that has an interesting concept behind it, and they can kind of see like these new creatures, this new environment, this new world. And it kind of like has its own, gives you kind of inspiration in its own right in creative ventures or what have you, while also giving you a solid gameplay challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, perfect. Anyone who wants to give a listen or a read over to your full review can do that over on our website now, gaming-sandbox.com. And with that, thanks a million so much, Lewis, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
So yeah, again, as I mentioned at the end of that piece, if you want to read Lewis's full piece, you can check it out over on gaming-sandbox.com. But thanks again to Lewis for talking to me earlier. Now, we're going to round up the show here now very quickly. I want to go through very much, obviously, all the socials and that, and so all the housekeeping out of the way. But as always, if you want to check out any of the articles we mentioned in this week's episode, they will be linked down in the description below. If you want to contact us over on Twitter or Instagram, our @ there is @GamingSandbox_. Facebook and LinkedIn, I don't know why we have a LinkedIn account, but we do, is @GamingSandbox. And then on YouTube, it's just Gaming Sandbox. With that being said, we also do have a Patreon, which would have been advertised to you earlier. You can go check that out again. It'll be one of the top links in the description. Chris, do you want to shout out any of your socials before we finish up?
I guess I'll just shout out my Twitter. I don't really use much else, to be honest, and I don't really use my Twitter much. But at Chris Clausen at GS is my Twitter. I don't have to say I don't use it too much, but occasionally it's usually me talking to one of you guys or some of the people from Robot Republic.
Perfect,
usually disagreeing on their takes.
Yeah, well, if you want to go over and I suppose hound Chris for his wrong takes, you can do that over on Twitter. On top of that, you can also find me over on Twitter at Odhrán Johnson. That's ODHRANJOHNSON. But thanks again all for listening in this week. Next week we'll be talking about loads of new stuff. Hopefully that comes up over the next week on the Sandbox. Thank you once all again, and we'll see you then. Bye.